Oh,
This meeting is being recorded.
welcome
Okay.
to welcome all to my paranormal closet where the stories and magic take place. Today's guests are here to discuss an encounter one of them had with Bigfoot in Mason County, Washington in the 90s. The author authored a book loosely based on the encounter. Please join me in welcoming Tim and Joe Moon. Hi guys, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, how's it going?
I don't know if either of you know it, but I too am an author. And my more well-known books are based on true account haunting tales. And when I was writing Sussex County Hauntings and Other Strange Phenomena, most people don't realize that I added the Other Strange Phenomena chapters because the public came out of the woodwork with stories about Bigfoot sightings in my community, right here in High Point State Park in Sussex County, where I live. And the stories were so good and intriguing that I needed to find a way to get them into a book about ghosts. And those stories continued to come in with other hauntings books I wrote. And so I continued to include them. And that was the same with UFOs, because how do you squeeze UFOs into a ghost book? Well, I added the Other Strange Phenomena chapter. Why don't you go ahead, Joe, and tell the listeners about what happened to you back in the 90s with Bigfoot?
Well, I was just up on my property and I was by I had a, between my house and a trailer I had. And then there's a road going up and then it ends right where a wood line is, just a line of woods. And there's like a power pole up there and the road just ends. Anyway, I was just working on my trailer lights, I think I was at the time. And because it's a long time ago. And I was smelling this weird wafting smell of it was like old matted dog or something. It was just terrible. That's what I remember firstly. And the next thing I know, I mean, I looked up and it was just right there, right next to the telephone pole, and it started to scream at me. It had this like howling yell, and it was piercing my ears, even it hurt my ears. And I just looked at it and I just ran towards my house.
Do you think that it just didn't know that you would? Did you think that it just didn't know that you were there? Did you catch it off guard? And how far away would you say distance-wise it was?
Oh, it had to be, I'm looking at it right now. It had to be only about 70, I don't know, 50 yards.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's close.
And it was huge. It was huge. And I mean, I turned and ran, and then I ran into my house and I grabbed my shotgun. It was right by the door. And but I had the door closed, but I had a window right. I could look out right there, and it just turned after it stopped screaming. It turned and just walked, took 3-4 steps, and it was gone into the woods. And I was just shaking. So I mean, I don't know. I never saw it again. I think I smelled it and heard it one more time, but it's like a sight to behold. You know,
Freaked you out.
It's just, well, it will freak anybody out. It was big.
And Tim, what prompted you to write a book specifically about this incident?
Well, it's not really, it's just inspired. I ironically, I've been interested in this since I was a kid, since I saw the creature from Boggy Creek, which came out in the 70s, I believe. And I had always just been interested on my own and looked into it on my own. And then one day, Joe and I were working together. We were helping my uncle, and I think Finding Bigfoot came on, and I asked him, I said, what's the weirdest thing that ever happened to you? And then he shared this story with me. And I had been thinking for a while to use fiction as a way of maybe making the Bigfoot phenomenon more accessible to people, because people like stories. And I saw a lot of nonfiction stuff related to Bigfoot, but I didn't see very much fiction stuff that I thought, well, maybe it'd be fun to write a book and just make the stories something and the characters something that people related to. And so when he shared that story with me, I just thought, well, maybe this is an opportunity to do that. And it's not really based on that, like, although his house is the center of the action in Mason County. But it did inspire me to finally do it. And then it took a few years to put it all together. I've never written a book, so it was I had a lot to learn, and it took a while to get motivated and work my way through all the things that you have to work your way through as a new writer from scratch. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about.
You and I are
So,
very similar. We're both in education. I'm in
yeah,
kindergarten. And
yeah,
I've been writing since I was in the 7th grade. And I wrote the first book, my very first book, which was a psychological thriller, back before we had children. And
yeah,
then it took me like a year, and I felt so accomplished, right, that I got this
right,
done. And it was just kind of like, oh, it's done. And then I put it up in the closet and forgot about it, raised my kids, was a
yeah,
stay-at-home mom. And it wasn't until they were full grown and I turned 50, all right, a friend from high school says to me, he wrote a book, and I shared that I had as well. And he said, well, what'd you do with it? I said, I haven't done anything. And he said, you gotta send it to my publisher. And that was really like the kickstart for me writing, because once I started again, my kids full grown out of the house, both of them, now I have time to really spend and do the writing thing, and kind of just threw myself in full force. But I never thought I was going to take this turn and start writing about true account stuff, because like you, Joe, I'm sensitive to spirit. And it just
Oh,
seems
there
like
you
we're a
go.
magnet. We're like a magnet for this stuff. And I knew that I had to do something with it, but I just never knew what it was until it happened, until I guess the
yeah.
universe provided the answer. But yeah, it is tough, and getting regimented and finding the time, but I finally found my joy.
Okay. Well, that's good. I like doing it. It's a lot of work though. It takes a lot
Yes,
of time. So,
it does.
but I
Have
hope
you read?
I'm getting good reviews. People seem to like it. And so I'm encouraged. I self-published it, so I'm still, everything is up to me to do everything. But
I ended up
um,
going that route as well. I first started with the publisher, and it was more of a nuisance than anything. So I finally broke away from the publisher and I self-published as well. And I've had much success doing that. I have more control over what's mine, and
yeah.
feel like that's a great route for you too, I think. That
Well,
people are more openly receptive.
maybe I can get some pointers from you sometime. Okay, that'd be great.
Absolutely.
That'd be
Absolutely.
great.
I would be happy to help you. But let's get back
But
to this Bigfoot thing. Do you
yeah,
guys believe those who think that there are hybrids of Bigfoot having mated with humans? Because I know there was a study done by a doctor named Melba S. Ketchum and her firm DNA Diagnostics not too long ago. And they used so-called real DNA samples, which concluded that Bigfoot is indeed a human hybrid that descended from human women who mated with men of unknown, and they called it like hominin species. I don't know if you heard anything about that, but I know there's a lot of stuff going out there, but I'd like your take on that.
well, I've
Well,
studied that a little bit. So the there's probably a chance that there's some human DNA in the Bigfoot, just because there has been mating between them and human females. But I'm not sure it's between apes and human females. I don't think that would work. So
No,
there
I
must
don't
have
think so
been a
either.
close connection from the beginning, if that is in fact the case. And many of the Native Americans believed that they were another tribe And they just, in
Oh,
fact, I discussed that in the book because there's a character in the book who's Native American. And that they just, for some reason, they were a tribe of humans that didn't develop the way the humans did. And I don't understand it all. There's a lot, usually there's a lot of more questions than answers when it comes to this thing. But
That's the way I feel about it too. Just more questions than answers.
if there
Yeah,
is
I mean,
human DNA, if they do have human DNA, though, there's some kind of connection. And, some people think it's the Nephilim connection. I'm not sure about that. I just don't know for sure. But I don't know. They're very strange, very big, very scary, and they do very weird things.
Yeah.
And
And
it
what
goes
about
way beyond what humans can do. So
Well-
in some regard, but we do things that they can't do. We think our mind is more conceptual, and we're able to use tools and stuff that they don't seem to know how to use. So anyway, it's very intriguing.
what about like you see orbs, and the people are saying they see orbs around them, or they see them and then they disappear and they're just a bright light or something. I've heard of that, and I think that's intriguing.
you mean orbs around, just in general, orbs around
Well,
people?
Or no,
About
about
Bigfoot.
like people have been saying that they see like bright lights when they're hearing a Bigfoot or something. They see like a light and then going through the woods or something like that, and then they don't hear them no more.
Well,
They
when I
often
was
report them
writing,
together.
when I was writing the book and I had the Bigfoot chapters in there, there was one story about a crashing of a UFO in Lake Owassa in Sussex County, New Jersey. And when that happened, I mean, it was hushed by the government. The family was told to keep quiet. In fact, the man who was a child at the time, I believe it happened in the 50s. I can't remember off the cuff, but I believe it happened in the 50s on his farm, his family's farm, and he was a kid at the time. And as he grew into adulthood, he didn't shut up about it. He tried to tell everyone he could about what happened, even though the government wanted them to shut up, because they had taken something from his lake and with military vehicles took it out, covered, and told them to tell nobody that anything like this happened. And so when he passed away, his niece took on the task of trying to tell everybody what happened on their farm that night. Coincidentally or not, right after that happened, they started having Bigfoot sightings here in Sussex County. And so people have naturally assumed that one went with the other, that maybe whatever it was that crashed into the lake brought them here. So I know that's another idea, that that's a possibility that they're from another planet and they
Well,
came and they stayed, and maybe that's the lights that are associated with when you see them.
I think if you don't find their scat, you don't find their bones, you don't find anything, except their footprints, right? We find footprints and they have, thermal ridges on them and stuff like that. That it would be hard to fake. But they could be from another realm or
Another dimension.
or another dimension or something like that, and they fade in and fade out. That's why that's bright light. Or I mean, at this point I would believe in anything, but I've seen one, so
Mhm.
I know they're there, and once you see it, you see it. You can't take it back.
You had mentioned something about how never bones have been discovered, and I'd spoken to somebody the other day about this same subject, and he was saying how if they traveled in family units and they were kind of like a tribe, they buried their dead. And so
It's
maybe that's
possible.
a reason for us never unearthing their bones, because they're not just lying there after they die, they're actually being buried.
I've heard that. I've heard one
Yeah.
I mean, I
story
was
of a
wondered,
man.
sorry,
Go
go
ahead,
ahead.
I'm sorry.
That's
I heard
okay.
one story of a man who saw them bury one,
Oh, okay.
but I've only heard one. And so it's very possible they do. It's also, how many times have you been out in the woods hiking and found deer bones or bear bones? It just doesn't happen. They deteriorate very quickly.
Yeah.
And
very rare, very
And
rare.
no one ever says they don't believe in bear because they haven't found a bear bones in the woods, you know?
Mhm.
So anyway, but I think it's just because of how fast they move and how high they jump and how strong they are. It just seems like they're kind of like Superman without kryptonite. Like maybe they did come from another planet where there was higher gravity or stronger gravity, and then they get here and they can do anything. There's no there's no limitations. And I just wonder if maybe they have been transported here and dropped off. And we've been around a long time. There's kind of a lot of planets, a lot of stars, a lot of galaxies, and
Well, I
we
worked
tend to
for
think,
I'm sorry, Tim, to interrupt you.
well, we tend to think we're the only ones in the universe, you know, and that this is
I
the
don't
only
think so.
place in the universe.
Yeah.
And I think that it's very likely they've been coming and going from here. A lot of things have been coming and going from here for a long time. So,
Well, I met a guy I was working for Suits and Timber Company in the 80s, 81, 82. And the guy was telling me he saw I remember this story. I was just a kid, but he was telling me he saw like a woman Sasquatch with two little ones walking down just the old truck trail.
See, I've heard that
Um,
too. I've heard of them having smaller and yeah, I've heard that too. But I hate to
So I
cut
mean,
you off from there. We do have
okay,
to end part 1 and go on to part 2. So I'm just gonna leave the listeners for a brief time and then we'll come back because we're losing time on our interview.
so do we need to get
So
back on, or we will?
yes,
Okay, so
we do.
the same way we did before?
Yes, I'll send you a link.
Okay.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.